Alright, so I'm gonna get started. Sorry this recording took so long to come out. I've been feeling pretty under the weather lately. So, to start off with this lecture, what you're gonna want to do is pull our lesson 2 skeleton code off of GitHub, and if you haven't fetched the origin since a couple days ago, since around October 17th, you should fetch origin, and then open up the folder that it gives you and launch the executable that says lesson 1 because this was just stemmed off our lesson 1 project, so we didn't rename it. Okay, so I'm going to go through the basics of creating a blueprint and the hierarchy of different uh, different parent classes that you can go through. So when you right click in the content browser, you're going to see create basic asset, blueprint class. Then it's going to give you these three main options, which are the only ones we're going to cover today. So an actor is any object that can be placed or spawned in the world. So when you think of an actor, you should think of something that interacts with your character or another pawn, but cannot be possessed and doesn't gain any of the player movement aspects that you get with a character. A pawn is an actor that can be possessed and receive input from a controller. So if you're creating a car or some other asset that your character or a controller, like an AI controller for an enemy, would be able to send input data to, and that's when you would want to use a pawn. A character is anytime you want your player that is playing the game to be able to control the person, and it gives the ability to use the functions built into the character movement class. So things like jumping, running, swimming, all of that, and it's predefined for you. So now that that's covered, we're going to go through creating something that I think every side scroller needs, and that's a double jump. So we're in our event graph right now. And to start off, we have our jump and double jump right here. So I'm going to walk through what every step of this is doing. So we have our input action jump that comes predefined with the 3D side scroller. And we have this thing called the do n. To get this, you're going to want to run off the executable like this and search up do n. So this is saying for n equals 2, so this is going to run twice. It's going to run for n equals 1 and for n equals 2. It's going to exit and it's going to do a switch on int. So it's going to execute this on the first time, it's going to execute this on the second time. You must run the counter into this so it knows what number n it's running through. And then you have this thing called onLanded. So this counter right here is going to reset every time your character hits the ground. So because we have character movement, we can run this predefined method called jump that will add a vector force in the z-axis of, I believe it's 1,000, but that can be modified inside of your character movement over here. See, jump z velocity 1,000. You can modify this to make his jump higher or shorter depending on what you want, but for our case, we're going to leave it at 1,000. And then the second time it goes through this switch, it's going to run a launch because your character is already in the air, and one of the like the crucial aspects of running the jump command is that your character has to be on the ground. And just to get around that, we're going to take our character movement, which we can get a reference to just by dragging this out, and we're going to target jump z velocity. So this is going to output 1,000 depending on what we set over here for jump z velocity. And then we're going to multiply it by a double jump multiplier. Right now I have this set to 1, but if you want your second jump to be more powerful, you can change this. To create this this multiplier right here, all you need to do is click on variable and name it double jump. Okay, and now this is a Boolean right now, so to change that, all I'm going to do is set it to a float and then compile. Now I can set a default value of 1. And to get a reference to this, just like with character movement, I'm going to drag it out and press get, right like that. So because I already have this, I'm just going to delete this, but that's a step to do that. So the way this works is it's going to go through, it's going to see when your character presses space on a keyboard or A on a controller. It's going to start this do end loop for n equals 2. This counter is then going to go and output 1 and then 2. So as it outputs 1, on the first time you press jump, your character is going to run the jump function from character movement. The second time they press it, before they've hit the ground, so this is going to reset the second they hit the ground right here. The second time, it's going to run a launch, and it's going to add a launch vector, or a force like vector in the z-axis for your jump z velocity times your double jump multiplier. So in my case, this would be 1,000 and this would be 1. So it's just going to add the exact same force in the z-axis that the jump function would. So let's see how this looks in the game. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now, I think another crucial aspect to a side scroller is having health, or pretty much any game is having a health system. So to start off doing this, I am going to create a variable over here that's a float value that's called health. Okay, so I'm defaulting mine to 100. You can default yours to anything, 1,000, 1, whatever you'd like. And once you have that, we're going to want to run this function called event tick. So event tick runs every frame. So every frame, it's going to run through this right here, and it's going to check right here. It's going to delete this. We're getting a reference to health. Again, you can do that just like that. Getting a reference to health. We're checking to see if it's less than or equal to 0. And if that branch is true, you can get a branch by pressing B and click. We're going to destroy the actor, and then we're going to run this thing called a do once. So because tick runs every second, we don't want to output game over indefinitely because this will continue to output as true. So we're only going to do this once, and we're going to print a string that says game over to the user. There. All right. So because I already have this depth volume like pre-set up in order to do damage to me, I'm just going to show you how this works with my widget down here. So see, it's actually decrementing my health. And once I get down to 0, I die, and it outputs game over in the top left over here. Okay, so I like how that's working. I think one thing that I want to add to this game is to create a double jump or a jump box, something that'll make my character jump a lot higher. So let's see. And that's what I've created right here. So I'm going to go into this jump pads blueprint that I created just by going right click here, blueprint class, and then actor, because I don't need character movement and I don't need this to be able to be possessed. So now that that's created, I'm just going to delete this new one I added, and I'm going to go into it, and I'm going to see that in the viewport right here, I have two objects in my component. A static mesh that you can get by add component, and then search static right here. So you add the static mesh, and then you go over to the details panel on the right, and you set it to a cube, and then you size it however you like with W, E, and R for translate, rotate, and then scale. So I'm going to delete this. And then after that, we're adding a box collision so we can tell when an object is intersecting with it. So you can just box collision right here. And you can do the exact same thing with that. Just be careful because if you make it rooted in the mesh, sometimes the size of the box collision can be deceiving and it won't actually tell if your actor is touching it. So I always like to keep uh, both of them parented in the root component. Okay, so now once you have those two objects here, you're going to want to go to hitbox or your box collision. I just named it hitbox and go and click on component begin overlap. You're going to press the add button there, and then on component end overlap, you're going to press the add there. So now in our event graph, you're going to see these two components right here, where you have a white arrow for execute and a blue for the other actor, the actor that is overlapping or ending overlap with the box collision. So in these right here, we're going to be uh, casting to our side scroller character. A cast essentially is saying, is this actor that is overlapping the side scroller character? If it's true, then I'm going to, as the side scroller character, set its jump height variable to boosted jump. And if it ends overlap, I'm going to set its jump height variable to a normal jump. So these two variables for boosted jump and normal jump, again, were just created, pressing plus variable, changing it to a float, and then compiling and setting it to 1500 and 1000 for normal. And you can just get a reference to these just like that. Forget. And it's the same with jump height inside of side scroller character. So now that we have this setting and resetting our jump height when we overlap with the jump sphere or jump box, and when we end overlap, we need to actually make that change inside of our side scroller character. So inside here, we're going to do something else inside of event tick. So we have our variable jump height right here, but we need to actually set it inside of character movement, and we can't get a reference to that inside of the jump box. So we're going to get a reference to character movement right here just by dragging it in. We're going to drag off of it and say set jump z velocity. We're going to run the execute off of the event tick, and we're going to get a reference to jump height right here that's being set by the jump box. And we're going to drag that right into set jump z velocity. So every frame that is rendered, the game is going to be checking what the jump height is set to, either 1000 or 1500, and it's going to set character movement's jump height to that. So I'm going to compile and save. And now when I walk over to here and I go on this, my jump is a lot higher. But when I walk off it, my jump is normal. So boosted, normal. Okay. So the next thing I want to cover is doing damage from the death volume in a way that it damages your character more than once, because I think a big problem with this is that if I just stand here, it's not going to keep doing damage to me. I have to actually end overlap and then restart overlap again. So I'm gonna fix that. So I'm gonna go into my death volume and I'm gonna take a look at what it's doing. So it's going right here. It's going on component begin overlap with the box collision right here. It's gonna cast my side scroller character, get a reference to its health, check and see if it's greater than 0 because it doesn't want to do damage to me if I'm already dead. When that's true, it's going to get a reference to its damage variable, which I have set to 10 right now, and it's going to decrement my health by 10. Okay, so that works, but we want to be able to see if I am still on the box collision. So if I haven't ended overlap, and if I am, we want to loop through this with just like a maybe 0.25 second delay. So to do that, we're going to go to the box collision, go back to the bottom where it says on component end overlap. We're going to click here. So, and I'm going to make a new variable called is on. So this is going to be a Boolean. So this is going to return true or false. I'm going to default this to false, but I'm going to take my on component end overlap, take the other actor node off it, and say cast a side scroller character. When this is true, I want to set is on, so set this time. I want to set is on to true. Or because I'm ending overlap, if it's side scroller character that's ending overlap, I want to set this to false. Okay, so inside of the begin overlap, we're going to need to do the steps to set this to true when he begins overlap. So we're going to be checking to see if his health is greater than 0, but we want to do that after we set the variable. So let's just drag all this over to the right a little bit. Jeez. Okay. So we're going to get this. We're going to set is on right here. I'm going to set it to true because he's just hopping onto the pad right now. Okay. And now we're going to add another branch by pressing B and left clicking. And we're going to check if is on is true. And if it is, we're going to continue. So I'm just going to put these up here a little bit. So I have to run a condition into this. So I'm going to get a reference to is on, because if I get a reference to it here, I know it's always going to be true because I'm setting it. Okay. So now the order of my blueprint is that on component begin overlap. So when my character starts overlapping with the box collision, I'm going to cast to the side scroller character. If the side scroller character is the other actor that is like overlapping with the box, then this is going to be true. So it's going to set is on to true. It's going to go through this branch right here and check if is on is also true still. I'm only checking here because I'm eventually going to be looping around and checking to see if the actor has left the box already. So then I'm getting a reference to my character's health, checking to see if it's greater than 0. If this is true, so if he's still alive, I'm decrementing his health by damage or 10. So now I want to loop from here to here, but I want to add a delay in between so it doesn't seem instant. That this will just keep running with such a small delay in execution that he'll just die almost instantly. So I'm going to run off this and type in delay. And for now, I'm just going to leave this at 0.2. That might be too much, that might be too little. We can tweak it once we actually see how it runs. So I'm running from the end of the delay, the completed, to before this branch right here. So when it's checking to see if he's still on it. Now this looks a little messy, so I'm going to double click right here. Hold on. Double click on this. Drag that up. Drag that up. I'm just going to delete this extra reroute node. So I think this is a lot easier to follow now. So we have our branch checking to see if our character is still on the box. That's true. Then we check their health is greater than 0. That's true. So then we actually decrement their health. Then there's a 0.2 second delay. Then it loops around back to checking if they're on the box again. So we're going to compile that and save it and see how that does. So now that we have our character, you can see that it does a lot of damage pretty quickly. So I think the best way to go about doing this is if you just go and tweak the delay and the amount of damage it's doing. So in terms of a UI perspective, usually doing less damage more frequently looks smoother on a health bar, but you guys can do whatever you want in your games. So the last aspect I'm going to cover in this lecture is adding that health bar onto the screen. So in order to add a health bar, you're going to first want to create a widget. So you go to right click inside of your content browser, click on user interface, then widget blueprint. Inside of widget blueprint, I'm going to delete this so I can just show you the one I've already created. Inside of your widget blueprint that I named health bar, you're going to get this new UI that you haven't seen before. So you're going to want to add a progress bar. So I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to add this in the top left. So to start off, I'm going to make this a little bit wider. Okay. So this is my progress bar. So I want it to always be on the top left of my screen no matter what size my game is running at. So I'm going to anchor it to the top left right here. So when you look in the details panel on the right, you can see there's a lot of settings here. The only ones we're going to need to mess with are the fill color right here, which you can just click here and set to, I don't know, red seems more of like a health related color in my mind. But again, it's all subjective. There we go. That's close enough to red. Not really, but we'll pretend. Okay, and then the other aspect that you're going to need to pay attention to is percentage, because that's what's determining how much of the bar is showing on your screen. So this is going between 0 and 1, as you can see. So 1 is 100%, 0 is 0%, obviously. So we're going to want to create what's called a binding. So I'm going to create a binding here for getting this. So because the player character is being possessed by our game's player, our like main input in the game, we can get this wild card called get player character. So you get a reference to the player character, the person who's actually creating input in the game. And then you're gonna cast to side scroller character, just like we did before. So that gets around us not having an actual reference to it like we did with the box collision and the other actor component. So now that we're the side scroller character, we're going to want to get a reference to their health. Okay, so the only issue we have here now is that our health is out of 100 points. So in order to get a value between 0 and 1, we're going to want to do float divided by float. So we're going to want to divide our current health by 100. And we're going to want to return this. Now, a common mistake that people make with creating bindings is that they don't actually run the executable all the way to the end because you don't think about it when you're going through these variables at the end. But make sure you run that and make sure your executable has a clean line all the way across. So you can compile this and save it. And now the last step to getting this to appear on the screen is inside of your side scroller character. You're going to want to go to event begin play. You're going to want to drag and execute off that for create widget. And you're going to want to select your health bar right here. And after you get that, you're going to want to run off the return value and say add to viewport. And then make sure you run your executable as well. Right there. Okay. So now that that is running, I'm going to compile, save, and inside of my game, I have 2 health bars now, and they both are bound to my health. If you want to add the text like I had right around here, you can also do that inside of the designer just by running text over like this, and you have to put in the input over here on the details panel, so health. There you go. And you can do the same thing with anchoring that to the top left. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can join our Discord. I'll have the link in the comments or in the description. Yeah, thanks.